Hello, Mr. Atheist, and thank you for taking the time to watch this response to your video, The Failure of Feminism. I've watched this video several times, and I've given your arguments a lot of serious thought. You raised some interesting points, and I definitely agree that there are inequalities concerning all genders that need to be addressed. However, I feel that your observation that feminism is the idea that we can make both sexes equal by focusing solely on the issues of one of them isn't completely accurate. It assumes that feminism only cares about making women equal and couldn't care less about men. I believe that's a false assumption, and in fact a dangerous one to make. It pits women against men in a battle that will only further widen the gender gap. Yes, feminism is a movement focused on women. This is because women are the ones at a disadvantage. We don't have the same privileges or rights as men. We aren't equal. If we were, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We need a movement to raise us up to the same playing field that men are already on. It's the same reason we have gay pride and not straight pride. The same reason we need to keep fighting for Black rights and Hispanic rights and Native American rights and other rights of ethnic minorities, not white rights. It's the same reason we have to focus on the 99%, not the 1%. The same reason that non-Christians have to constantly assert our right to believe differently. When the minority speaks up and asks to be treated equally and to be given the same rights and privileges as the majority, it's not to try to bring the majority down or to imply that the majority has no problems of its own that need to be dealt with. When the scales are tipped in favor of one group over another, you have to fix the problem from the bottom up, not the top down. That's why even though it's called feminism, it still encompasses all issues of gender inequality, including the issues that affect men. And you are right, the genders will never be truly equal if we don't look at both women and men and make the necessary balances. Feminism inherently addresses inequalities facing all genders, because those inequalities are caused by the same factors that cause discrimination against women. And that's patriarchy, a concept I know you despise. You said you reject the idea of patriarchy because you yourself do not view women as inferior. You say it's because you don't sit around cackling and rubbing your hands thinking of new ways to subjugate women. Of course you don't. No one is blaming you. No one should be, at any rate. Men are not the problem. Patriarchy is. The distinction gets lost in the heat of the debate, so I'd really like to make clear exactly what patriarchy is and how it's harmful to not only women, but all genders. Patriarchy is a social system. It's ingrained in our culture because we've evolved under it for hundreds of years. It's a system that favors masculinity and traditionally masculine traits over femininity and traditionally feminine traits. This could be simplified to say that patriarchy favors men over women, but like you pointed out, that's not always the case. And that's where the confusion and oftentimes anger and indignation arise. You say patriarchy is bogus when it comes to the discrimination that men face in regards to the following: domestic violence, child support, reproductive rights, circumcision, criminal sentencing, and war. I'll address these individually soon. You said that it was explained to you that all of this inequality favors men over women. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. Inequality favors no one. I think whoever said that was mistaken in using that phrasing. The inequality that men face is different than the inequality that women face. Women face inequality because we are women. Men face inequality not because they are men, but during a time when they express any trait that is not traditionally masculine. This is why patriarchy is so harmful. It sets up gender roles that are intended to keep masculine traits desirable and feminine traits undesirable. It's not necessarily to keep all men in power and all women subjugated. You yourself said that gender roles are the problem. They are, but I think what you don't realize is that these gender roles are a direct result of the patriarchal system. This is why domestic violence against men isn't taken as seriously as domestic violence as women. Men are supposed to be strong, and women are supposed to be weak. So there's just no possible way that a woman could hurt a man, let alone beat him up. At least not in a society that believes these fallacies. As far as emotional abuse is concerned, our society conditions men that they are supposed to be logical and not emotional. To show any sign of emotions is weakness. How can we expect a man in this kind of society to find recognition and awareness for the problems that he faces? That's why child support laws favor women over men. These laws assume that men are the providers and women are the caregivers. They assume that men have the monetary resources that women don't. They assume that women are more nurturing than men. They assume that a child needs its mother more than its father. All of these things are wrong, of course, but they're cultivated in a system that believes that men should be bringing home the bacon while women should be at home taking care of the kids. If you don't believe that this is still the case, I encourage you to watch the clip of Megyn Kelly from Fox News taking on Eric Erickson and Lou Dobbs. I've linked it below. As far as reproductive rights go, I'm unclear as to what you mean by that, so I can't really address it. Do you mean that most of the time women are awarded custody of children in cases of divorce? If so, then yes, for the reasons that I already explained. But when you say reproductive rights, I can't help but to call to mind the recent debates over abortion and birth control. I feel like you would agree with me when I say that men have a lot more control over their body and a lot more freedom when it comes to expressing their sexuality than women do. In a patriarchal society, men are expected to be virile. The more conquests that they have, the more of a man they are. On the other hand, women are expected to be virginal and pure. That's why birth control is such an issue when it really shouldn't be. And now on to circumcision. I have a bone to pick with you for calling circumcision genital mutilation. It's not by any means genital mutilation. While I agree that this procedure should not be performed on babies and that men should have the right to choose when they are adults whether or not they want it done, you have no grounds to compare circumcision to female genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation is done with the express purpose of making it nearly impossible for a woman to enjoy sex, thus protecting her virginity. It can result in horrible consequences such as hemorrhage, shock, collateral damage to the surrounding areas, HIV and AIDS, and other awful things. It mutilates a woman's vagina to the point that it can't function like it normally should. Circumcision does not affect a man's ability to enjoy sex or to perform naturally. There are arguments that having an intact foreskin increases sexual pleasure, but these arguments are all subjective and therefore aren't logical. There are arguments that circumcision helps prevent the spread of HIV, AIDS, and other STIs. Whether or not you want to believe that data is up to you, but the point is this: circumcision and female genital mutilation are completely different things, and to try to compare them is unwarranted. I'm not sure where you got your statistics that women receive 40% less harsh sentences than men for committing the same crime, but I will admit I looked into it and it does seem that judges feel like they have to be more lenient towards women plaintiffs than with men. Again, it's those gender roles at play that make the judges feel like they have to go easier on women because women are seen as weak and irrational. So it wouldn't be fair to punish a woman as if she were a man. And on to your final point about men being drafted and women not being subjective to the selective services. A society where men are supposed to be the strong ones, the providers, the protectors, who do you think is going to have to go to war? It took years for women to even be allowed to volunteer for the army, and just recently to be allowed to fight on the front lines. You mentioned that when you look at the balance of power, it's always the rich that have it and the poor that don't, not the men that have it and the women that don't. But you forget that it's not just simple power we're talking about. It's societal privileges that men have that women are still lacking. It's the advantages that being a man gets you over being a woman that we just don't have access to. The fact is that in America today, the people with the most privilege are the people who are white, rich, Christian males. The simple fact that you are a man and I am a woman immediately gives you a leg up in our society. I'm not blaming you for it, and I definitely don't want you to feel guilty over something you can't control. Individuals do not decide who gets privilege and who doesn't. Society does. But individuals can change the way that society thinks. That's why we need feminism. That's why we need privileged allies like you and like any man to stand up and reject the way that society is right now. We can't change anything if we don't know what the problem is, and the problem is patriarchy and the gender roles that come with it. I repeat, the problem is not men. The problem is patriarchy. You, Mr. Atheist, are not now, nor have you ever been part of the problem. You are not responsible, nor is any individual man, for the way that society has evolved over the centuries. No one should be saying that. But to deny that patriarchy still exists, that it can only describe our society the way it was 50 years or so ago, is to deny that women are still unequal. It's to deny that we still don't have the same privileges as men. It's to deny the context that's necessary for these discussions and for the movement towards gender equality. To deny patriarchy is to deny us any recourse for fixing things. I ask you, in all seriousness, without sarcasm or snark, If it's not patriarchy and the gender roles that come with it that are keeping the genders unequal, then what is? What do you propose as an explanation for why women and men who express traditionally feminine traits are still inferior to men who express traditionally masculine traits? Feminism aims to destroy the patriarchal system. It doesn't aim to destroy men. By breaking down the patriarchal system and the gender roles that are a direct byproduct of it, we not only advance women, we advance those areas that you pointed out where men are at a disadvantage too. Men cannot be equal to women when women are not yet equal to men. It seems to me that ultimately it's the language that's tripping you up. I can understand how using feminism and patriarchy can make it seem like this is a movement by women, for women, against men. But I promise you, it's not. This is a movement by people, for people, against an unfair and unjust system, against outdated roles that we are expected to play because of an innate, unchangeable part of our identity. You and I agree on the most important point. The fact that all people, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, sexuality, belief system, or any other facet of identity, deserve equal rights. It's true that when you argue for one group of people to be treated equally, you have to argue for all groups of people to be treated equally. What you call yourself, feminist, humanist, self-determinist, matters not one iota. But I do feel that to discredit feminism simply because the language is imperfect is a mistake. Thank you for watching this whole thing, Mr. Atheist. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I would love to continue this conversation if you're interested. I've linked all the references that I've used over the course of researching my response to you in the description.